It's a strategy-heavy podcast as we dive into just about every strategy angle of FAAB, from knowing who to pick up and when to drop a player, how much to bid, how to pace yourself, and even what exact number to bid on in certain situations. Plus, we'll have waiver wire, injuries, and much more. NFBC veteran Scott Jenstad joins us next on Beat the Shift. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast, presented by Fangraphs. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always is Ruven Guy. How are you, Ruven?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Hey, I just talking to everybody about some wild incident that happened to me. Let's just say that be careful when you order a salad at a restaurant, right?
Yeah, you may get arrested, so go with the fries. It's a very, very odd story, but you know, it's you wouldn't have that problem at Citi Field. I don't think they serve salad at Citi Field.
Nah, just hot dogs and burgers and other stuff and beer. Well, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk a lot of strategy. We do talk about players in the show, and one of the things that we preach on our Beat the Shift podcast is that it's a lot about strategy winning the games. You can know the players, but if you don't know how to effectively manage your team, you're going to be lost. And it's an advantage just on its own to do the strategy. We've got a great guest today who's one of the best players at FAAB. Scott Jenstad of RotoWire, who's an NFBC veteran. Welcome to the show, Scott. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm looking forward to it, and I can promise you that Dodger Stadium, they do have salads.
Ooh, nice.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, a lot of salads here at Dodger Stadium.
Nice. I should definitely catch one. I've never been to I've been to LA once, but only for business meeting. I've never stayed. Is it a nice stadium over there?
It is beautiful once you sit down and can watch the game, and the backdrop and all that is just miserable to get in and out of, which makes it a little tough. They get a lot of heat for people leaving early, but it's like a big game, and the problem is they get good crowds almost every night, but it's just really tough to get in and out. There's 3 arteries in and out of it, and there's only one freeway right there. It's just it's very nice once you sit down. It's a great place to watch a game, but getting in and out is very difficult.
Right, but you can get a salad, so it's a big advantage.
You can get a salad, you can get sushi, you can get whatever you want there.
Nice. I'm sure you can get that at Citi Field, right?
I imagine.
I've never ordered it before, so I don't know.
Yeah. All right, well, anyways, I'm going to jump right into it. I'm going to talk about FAAB today, the process of bidding, when to bid, why to bid, and different aspects of it. So, just want to start very generally with you, Scott. One thing I've noticed is that playing the waiver wire and the whole use of the waiver wire during the season has changed somewhat over the past 5 years or so. Do you agree with that? And would you say that the waiver wire is more or less important these days? And I do want to preface that everything we're talking about today is geared to redraft leagues. Dynasty is obviously very different. But in terms of redraft leagues, do you think that the waiver wire, playing it, is more important or less important over the past 5 years?
I'll answer your first question. I think it's definitely changed, and I think it's changed because of the amount of resources that are out there now that focus on FAAB. You've got, 5, 8, 10 years ago, it was it was on Sundays I'd sit down. It was kind of the Wild West. There was a couple articles on RotoWire usually, but you have Vlad Sedler's article on FTN Fantasy is a great place for FAAB. Ryan Bloomfield now does an article on Baseball HQ that's really good. Jeff Zimmerman on Fangraphs has a really good one. So there's just so much content out there that it used to be I can sneak this guy through, or nobody will know this guy got called up. And I think that's changed a lot. Maybe the last 8 years or so. I think the content out there, the amount of resources that are really, really good that help people get through FAAB, I think it kind of just creates a baseline that everybody's starting at, rather than everybody's starting at zero. And some people are grinding out, working harder. Some people are just kind of looking for the sexy call-ups and not really digging deeper. And with all the sources and content, I think it's changed a lot. I actually think it's more important now than it used to be for kind of 2 reasons. There's more injuries now. There seems like there's always someone that it's either tweaked or going on the IL. It seems like a lot of injuries the last few years. And the short starters, starting pitchers going shorter amount of time, brings in a lot of middle relievers into play in FAAB, brings more starters into play, trying to figure out. I think that 7th, 8th, and 9th spots on your pitching rotation is a lot more kind of churn and fungible. It used to be, just because there aren't as many locked in starters you can kind of start every week.
Yeah, the injuries are a very, very big part of why it's changed. And I can tell you from a statistics standpoint, from a evaluation standpoint, that there is more value lost in the draft, like from the players that you draft at the beginning of the season, more value seeds from it to the below replacement level than it ever did before. I mean, there are people jumping up who were not drafted that come up, especially on the pitcher side also. As you said, the pitchers are much more fungible. When pitchers don't go consistently 6, 7, 8 innings, the whole arrangement and the whole way of the pitcher, it just changes. And you get many more pitchers jumping up to above replacement level, and everything comes more fungible. I mean, the whole mid-range $10, $20 players is packed with players. You know, the difference between the 10th and the 30th and the 40th best pitcher becomes a lot smaller. Do you agree with all this, Ruben?
I agree with everything, and it just goes to show, Scott, you mentioned that there's so many articles now there about FAAB that wasn't there before. That shows how important FAAB is now, that it's evolved to the point where there are no more quote-unquote sleepers, because if everyone's calling them a sleeper, they're not really a sleeper anymore. If anyone has these hidden prospects that are on the waiver wire that you can get, they're not really hidden because everyone's mentioning them. And it's so much more complicated now to try to figure out how much money you're going to spend on each individual player, how you're going to allocate your budget, and it's so much more complex than it was even 5-10 years ago, like you mentioned, Ariel.
Yeah, and we'll talk a lot about that tonight, about specifics of pricing and all that. Before that, I just want to get a feel for when do you do this during the week? Like, what's your schedule? Do you put in FAAB bids when you see a player in the middle of the week? Do you tend to do this all on Sunday? Do you put some in on Friday? Like, how does it work for you schedule-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just everybody's a little bit different with that. I am one that I'm usually pretty busy during the week. I have a wife and kid also, so I try not to do too much during the week. I enjoy watching games, and part of me with fantasy baseball is I want to enjoy the games during the week. Like, I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, this guy just got a hit, let me go add him to my FAAB list. So I don't really think about it a ton. I'm watching enough games, I'm talking or chatting or texting about baseball enough that I have a pretty good idea of what's going on. But then I really usually sit down either Saturday night or Sunday morning and look at each of my teams. As we get into this, I think that, looking at your team first is a really important thing, and I can go into detail on that. But usually for me, it's Sunday. I used to be of the mindset, like, the more I grind on Sunday, the more hours I spend, the more I'm going to get out of it. I think there's a point of diminishing returns with that, so I've tried to cut back a little bit. Whereas I get to the point where I need to get to, and I kind of stop and put my bids in. So usually for me, it's a Sunday afternoon activity. The deadline, NFBC leagues, which I mostly play, is 7:00 in my time zone here, Pacific time zone. So probably I don't know, like 3 to 7, something like that. I'm pretty much digging in on my 3 or 4 teams that had that FAAB deadline, and really get into injuries and getting into my teams and what I need and what who's starting that week. Who got called up, who's doing well. So I really dig into probably about 3 to 4 hours on Sundays is kind of what I try and earmark for it.
So you mentioned you first look at your team. What did you mean by that?
So I think that's actually the most important thing I do. I talked to a lot of people about FAAB, and everybody's like, oh, let's just jump into the free agents and see who's there. But I think the most important thing and the way to really be more efficient with your time, I hear a lot of people talk about, I spend too much time on this, but a lot of times people will spend 20 minutes looking at shortstops when you have 3 in your team. So I think, first is figuring out what categories you need. So I'll go through and look at my league and, see if do I need stolen bases? Do I need saves? Am I going up in a category, down a category? I actually keep a spreadsheet where I track where I stand each week. So I know, because if I'm at 9 points in home runs, but I was at 15 points 3 weeks ago, or if I'm at 3 points 3 weeks ago, that means different things. One of those means 9 points means I'm doing well and on the right track. One means maybe I'm slipping there. I need to address power. So I look at what categories I need, and then I look at what positions I need. So I look at my team and how many corners do I have? How many middles do I have? Do I have enough outfielders if one guy gets hurt, 2 guys gets hurt? I want a backup middle, a backup corner, and a backup outfielder on my bench at all times. So I dig in first on categories so I know what I need to make a run. Keep my standing wherever I am, depending on where I am, but also what positions I need. Do I have 9 pitchers this week? Do I have 8? Suddenly I need 2 pitchers this week. If I have 11 guys I like, that maybe I'm not digging as deep on the pitcher, wasting my time in that league, looking at someone that gets a 1 start against Pittsburgh and trying to find a sneaky guy. So I think that looking at your team, kind of figure out what you need, where you need it, what positions you need, can really help you make yourself a lot more efficient, and also help yourself with figuring out what you do need when you get there. Because if you need a first baseman or a third baseman, it's time to dig deep in there. Whereas if you don't, maybe you can skip and save some time there.
So Ruvain, what do you actually look at where you are in the standings? Like, does it matter for you in FAAB if you're in 3rd place versus 9th place in terms of your pickups and what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think you have to base it on that. You have to see where you are if you have the possibility of actually gaining points in a certain category. Like let's say if you're 10 points away from getting points in stolen bases. What's the point of looking at a guy who steals? There's really no point. It's a waste of your time, and it's a waste of your fab budget. Even if he's a top fab guy on everyone's list for that week, it doesn't matter. Your team may be different than what other people say the best fab guy out there for that week is. So looking where you are and where you can gain the most points, that's where you can get the best bang for your buck when it comes to the fab.
And that's a really good point, too, because like last week, Vinny Pascantino was the top guy, but my bids across every team that I have was different based on what I needed. So I know he was the top guy, and everybody's like, oh, you need to bid on this, on that. But, if you're on a team that needs offense, that bid needs to go up. If you're a team that your offense is stacked, you need pitching, like maybe you save some fab. So it's really important to know what you need, and it really morphs and molds, what you bid on a guy.
Sure. Scott, you play in a lot of leagues. Our listeners, some of them play in just one, some play one or two, some of them do play in a lot of leagues as well. We have an assortment of listeners here. How do you deal with the fact that you have so many leagues? Are you constantly looking at, say, well, I like Vinny P or I like some person and, let's try to get him in every single league? Or are you digging into, well, this league I need this league I need this? How do you handle all the multiple leagues?
I actually probably play in less leagues than you think I do, and I do that for that reason that just Sundays get too crazy. And it's not fun for me if I've got, I know people play in 20 leagues and they're doing fab all day Sundays. It's just not fun for me. I have like 4 NFBC teams that are really my focus. I have a couple other like local leagues I play in, but I pretty much have 4 leagues that are my focus on fab, on setting lineups, because, NFBC got set lineups on Monday, got set lineups on Friday. So I actually limit my leagues just for that reason. I don't play with a partner. I play my own teams, and I just find that if I get any more teams than that, I lose my effectiveness. I lose how good I am at each one, and it's not fun for me to it's also not fun for me to roster every player in the league. I like rooting for guys, and if I have too many teams, I'm like, oh, I own him on these 2 teams, but not these 2, and it becomes not fun for me. So I've actually limited my teams. I pretty much play like a core 4 teams each year.
Okay. I'll tell you, though, that you mentioned you don't play with a partner. I actually find that playing with a partner with Ruvain in most of my leagues actually helps in all the leagues, because you may not be aware of a certain player, and Ruvain mentions the guy, and well, maybe can I get him in a different league? Will he work for me on that team in a different league? So having a partner alerts you to some other teams. I play with Derek Hardy in a league called GDD, and Derek Hardy, he gives me a player. Hey, is this guy available? Oh, and if I am interested in him in our league, maybe I can look at him in a league I'm not playing with him. Having a partner, I think, actually helps with fab. Also, you can split up the work. You can do work together. Both of them are fun. Both of them are part of the process, as well as if one of you is stuck away or whatever, you have somebody to do it. You don't have to kill yourself. But what do you think, Ruvain? I mean, you do fab with me on a weekly basis, so what are your thoughts on teamwork there?
I think the teamwork is extremely important, especially if I hear some news on Sunday that you don't hear, and I'll say, oh, look, this guy we put on our fab bet, because usually we talk about fab on Friday. We usually put out our initial bids on Friday. We wait for the weekend to end, see if anything changes, then we reassess on Sunday. Now, if I'm out on Sunday or you're out on Sunday and we catch something on the news and the other person catches something on the news or something that's new, we'll say, okay, go home, change this and do that, because if it was one person, you wouldn't be able to do that. You may miss something. You may miss that big pickup. You may miss the fact that you put in fab money for a guy who just went on the IL on Sunday, because that happens often. And it's so much easier. It's more relaxing, put it that way. You don't have to worry. Even if you have a lot of teams, it's more relaxing, because if you don't catch something, maybe your partner will catch it.
All right, so let me throw out the general question for you too, Scott. What do you look for when you're picking up players? Like, what determines, okay, all right, I need a shortstop. What are you looking for? Are you looking for the one that you think has the best projections? Are you looking for the one that has the best upside name pedigree? Are you looking for how he's done in the past month? Are you looking at individual stats? Like, how do you actually find and filter the players that might interest you?
I think some of that depends on what point of the season you're at. I think that at the beginning of the season, I'm really looking for difference makers, guys to make a big splash, someone who I might end up starting for 5 months. As you get later in the season, I'm looking at short-term schedule plays. If I'm looking at the next, if we got 6 weeks left in the season, I'm really looking at the next 2 weeks. What offenses play 15 games the next 2 weeks? Who's going to Coors? Who's facing Pittsburgh and Detroit and Oakland pitching? So I'm really doing short-term schedule plays. A lot of it depends too on what I'm replacing. If I have someone that's out for 2 weeks and it's a stud that I know is going to be right back in. Say one of my outfielders gets hurt and he's going to be out. He's a 15-day deal, but he's going to be back. Then I'm looking for short-term schedule. If I lose someone for the season, if I lose Bryce Harper for 2 months, then I'm looking for more of a difference maker. But I'm usually looking for category help, position help, and trying to fill the spots that I need. But I'm mostly looking for you obviously at the top. You're always looking for that guy that's you're going to end up starting for you every week. But that's very hard to find. There are some of those that do come up, so you're always looking for that. But after that, I'm really looking for kind of short-term plays, especially on the fringes. Maybe my fifth outfielder, my utility, my middle. I'm looking for someone that's going to help me for the next couple of weeks. And maybe if he sticks, that's great. But if not, I can figure it out after that.
Really good advice. And how about the flip side of that? How do you decide when to actually cut a player? Like, underperformance, maybe there's an injury that's just going to linger too long. Like, well, how do you determine what spots you're going to have to cut, the tough decisions there?
I think that's something that's not talked about enough. There's a lot, we talked about there's a lot of FAAB content that's out there. There's not a lot of should I cut this guy in a 12-teamer? It's a hard article to write, and I've thought about doing it in the past. It's just hard to do because everybody's league size is different. Everybody, who's available is a little bit different. But for me, I'm pretty stubborn with my top picks. I know if you got guys that are really struggling, you got to think about it. But, someone like Trevor Rogers, an example, I'm not cutting Trevor Rogers yet. I just know the upside is there. He's been frustrating. He's not been good. You look and you don't see a lot of good, but and there's enough upside there that I'm not cutting someone like that. But, mid-rounders who are underperforming and no real sign of breaking out, I'll dig into the numbers, is this guy striking out more? Is he not hitting the ball hard? I'll look to see what the problem is, but if I don't see a clear, maybe he's getting a little unlucky, or it's coming around, that mid-rounders, this is about the time of year where I'm willing to cut someone like that. Fringe guys. So guys we talked about before, kind of churning the bottom end of the roster. Fringe guys that aren't useful for 2 weeks, I usually cut pretty quickly. If I have a pitcher that's kind of on my fringe and, he goes to at Yankee Stadium and then at Toronto, I'm cutting that. I'm not going to wait 3 weeks for a guy who, I'm not going to use for 2 weeks and then is kind of fringy anyway. So I'm really kind of ruthless with those guys. Offensive guys who, have 5 games and then maybe have to face some tough pitching. I'm really willing to cut those fringy guys really fast. And someone comes back to bite me, that'll happen every once in a while. But I think that, you got to be a little bit aggressive with those fringe guys. And then this point of the season, anybody who's not a star who's out for a month, I'm probably cutting. You get to the point where that month turns into 6 weeks, and that 6 weeks you get a little bit of rust also, and suddenly you're keeping a guy for September, and I'm very unwilling to do that. So I'm pretty ruthless with cutting injury guys too. Every once in a while that comes back to bite me too, but for the most part, most of those injury time frames tend to come out on the long end of the time frame. There's usually a couple weeks of rust in there too.
Yeah, I mean, to preface that, some of the injury talk that you mentioned, I agree with everything you said, just that the injury talk is pertinent to non-IL or limited IL leagues, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right. I mean, if you're in a league that has 7 IL spots, 5 IL spots, whatever, obviously you're going to keep anybody who's injured. The cut decisions at the bottom are for underperformance, things like that. I have three rules or 3 things that I'll say about the cutting the players. One is the general rule that we've mentioned in the show. If somebody's going to pick up the guy next week, you may think twice about cutting him, right? It's about how long the guy can stay in the wire. If you're going to cut somebody who's injured and nobody's going to pick him up next week, it's good to cut him, right? You can always get him next week for nothing, if that's the theory. Second is opportunity cost. Ruben and I were in an NFBC league, and we have Yasmani Grandal, who's been struggling, and he's injured. Somebody dropped Salvador Perez. We had to decide: do we want to hold on 1 month of 2 months of Grandal for 1 month of Salvador Perez? You got to weigh your opportunity cost as much as that. Third rule, sort of forgetting what my third rule is. I'll think of it. I'll come back to you, Ruben. You go first. I'll think of it later.
Well, actually, Scott, I actually have Trevor Rogers on one of my teams, and I dropped him. I actually cut him this week. It was a 12-team home league, and I just thought, you know what? If I'm not going to play him, and I think about not playing him when he had a 2-start week. If I'm not playing with a 2-start week, he's got a 5 ERA. He doesn't show any signs of turning it around. The Marlins actually have other pitchers that can take his spot in the minors at any time because they can. He still has options. He's still young enough. So He's a guy that I thought is personally perfect guy to cut. I didn't have any qualms with it, and you just have to have the guts to do it. I mean, you spent a lot of draft capital on him, but you know what? I just don't. If you can't play him, or if you can't see any time you're going to actually roster him, there are other guys out there that'll be better. I mean, I had Shane Baz, who I had to activate, so I activated Shane Baz, and I dropped Trevor Rogers. So I thought that was okay to do. I know, obviously, I hear you. You still see upside on him, and there is upside on him, and someone will pick him up next week. I have no doubt that someone will pick him up, but let him be someone else's headache. Same thing like a guy like Joey Gallo. We have him in a bunch of leagues. Do you cut him? He's such a big headache. Do you play him? Do you not play him? When you play him, he goes 0 for 25. When you sit him on the bench, he'll do what he did a couple nights ago when he'll hit a couple of home runs. So it's you can't tell what's going to happen, and sometimes I know, Ariel, you hate this, but you have to go with your gut when you're cutting somebody.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned like Joey Gallo. I think that what standing you are in really matters for a guy like that. If you're in first place, I have no problem cutting Joey Gallo because you need expected performance, right? You just need the roster spot to get you some amount of home runs. And Gallo, I don't know if he could turn into a pumpkin, right? He is a pumpkin. He could stay a pumpkin. But if you're in, I don't know, 14th place out of 15. The off chance that Joey Gallo turns it on and becomes the 40 homer per year type guy is worth it to save because you're not jumping up from 14th to 3 with expected performance. You need to get better than expected performance. So depending upon the league size, I think it makes a difference for a guy like that. And I did remember the third thing, that the third mantra or whatever, is uniqueness of profile. If a guy is pretty replicable on the waiver wire, it's okay to cut. If he's the type of pitcher who, they're dime a dozen, I can get a guy who throws a 4.25 ERA and 1.3 whip, you can throw him back on the waiver wire. He hits power, a couple of RBIs, doesn't steal, hits 250. There's a lot of them on the waiver wire. But when you have uniqueness of profile, guy steals 10 bases, hits 10 homers, that's something interesting. Pitcher who has a very low whip, something interesting that's not readily available on the waiver wire, I'd cut them less.
Yeah, and your Rogers point is interesting because you kind of in a 12-teamer, and I think that's a lot more workable. I have him a 15-teamer, and I've held so far just because every time I look, the replacement cost is not good. Like if I get to a point where there's 2 or 3 pitchers, I'm like, oh, these guys are just better than him, then I would do it. But 15-teamer pitching is just so hard this year that I haven't found myself finding anyone better. But he's been bad. He's been frustrating. You're right. Someone will pick him up, and maybe it'll just never work. But I tend to be a little stubborn too. The difference in me with like someone like that is I liked him a lot preseason. Someone like Joey Gallo, I wasn't really drafting anyway. So if I randomly ended up on a team, I'd probably be more willing to cut someone that I wasn't super in on in the preseason.
Right. Now, it's good that we're talking about the strategy. As you said before, like we don't talk about this kind of stuff enough. But you definitely have to think about these types of things, and every situation is different. Every league's different. We can't tell you on the show you must drop this guy, which could only give you the guidelines and let you think about what we're talking about and make your own decision on your own based on it. I want to talk about the amount of FAAB. And, of course, it's always going to be league dependent. If you had to spend early for some reason, you had a rash of injuries, you had to spend early, we know that. But as a general rule, Scott, how much FAAB do you think is a good amount or the normal average amount that somebody should have right at now, roughly by the All-Star break? And I'll throw in, does it matter if it's a $100 FAAB league versus a $1,000 FAAB league?
Yeah, I mean, your point at the top about, if you get in trouble and maybe you lost 2 closes and you had to spend, like, there's a lot of ways where, spending early just makes a lot of sense. And I usually don't, but there's some leagues where I have, and sometimes you just kind of don't have a choice there. Talking $1,000 league, I'm talking $1,000 league with no $0 bids. I think that's a really important point. A lot of leagues you can bid $0, so you can keep picking guys up. And you're not stuck. And whereas in NFBC, you got $1,000. If you go to 0, you don't get to pick anybody else up. So if someone gets hurt, you cannot replace them. So the $0 bids means is a big difference. I'm way more willing to go low when there's $0 bids. But in a $1,000 league with no $0 bids, I'd probably want about $350 to $400 right now, something like that. I understand that's probably a little higher than most people have or most people like to have, but I like to be able to control FAAB the next 2.5 months. I like to be able to pick someone. If someone does makes a bad drop, I want to be able to swoop in and bid on that player. If there's rookie gets called up, if I need some stolen bases, someone gets called up. I need 2-star pitchers. I like to be able to control the end game a little bit. So my ballpark range, it varies by team and so much changes, but I'd say $350 to $400 at the All-Star break is usually my goal, somewhere in there.
Yeah, that's pretty close. So I would generally say roughly a third, maybe a drop more. And I like you, I err on the side of having a little bit more FAAB. Ruben, I think you agree with that, right?
100% I agree. And you know what? If your team is not doing that well, you should have spent more money already, because what are you going to do? Spend all your money in September when you're out of it already? This is the time to spend it. You're going to have it left on the bench anyway. You're not going to use it if you're going to be out of it. So if you have it, use it. And you should have if you have 300, 350, even 400 left, you'll have plenty of fab for the rest of the year. Plenty.
So one thing I want to ask Scott, two of these things, do they come in play when you're making fab bids? One is previous league history, meaning, you know the guys in the league, they bid a certain amount on a certain player. Do you look at what people have been doing for the past year? Do you look at previous years and making fab bids? And the other question is, do you actively look at how much fab is left by each team? So if everybody is really using fab, does that mean that you probably should have used more fab up to now? And if everybody is holding fab, they've got 500 left, probably means you should have gone lower. So what do you think about those two things?
I don't worry about the fact of, do I have too much, do I have too little? But I do look at it. I'd probably say look at maybe the last couple months of the season. I definitely look at who has the most fab left at that point, too. Because sometimes you have some teams that are in, 12th, 13th, 14th place. They have a bunch of fab. You're like, yeah, they're probably not going to use it. Every once in a while, those teams come out of have the Undertaker meme and come out of the coffin and bid a bunch one week. But for the most part, you can kind of, factor those teams out a little bit. And they're, especially these last 2 months, if there's teams that are close to me and I know they have very little fab, maybe I could drop down my bid a little bit because they can't go really high for players. So I do look at that. In terms of previous league history, I would say only for the bigger bids. I don't really worry about that normally. But if there was a closer that was available a month ago, I'll look and see what were people bidding. What was the backup bid? How much did someone bid on that? If there's a rookie that gets called up, we had Riley Green a couple weeks ago, and when Vinny P was called up, I took a look at the Riley Green bids. Like what were we looking at a couple weeks ago? What did people bid? Did someone bid 300 and nobody else bid more than 50? What was the backup in there? So I would say I don't use it a ton, but on the bigger bids and late in the season, I do use that as a tool to kind of figure out and maybe mold my bids a little bit to help me out.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. It's not the gospel, but it does flavor my thoughts a little bit. And why not? Just take a look at the history of, all right, what was the max bid on a closer this year? That kind of thing could be helpful. As far as looking at other people in the league, I always tell people more like in the draft season for the auction style draft or salary cap, whatever they call it these days. You always want to be or aim to be somewhere in the middle because from an economic standpoint, it's about purchasing power. If you have too fewer dollars than everybody else, when somebody comes up for a bid that you might be interested on, your money doesn't go as far as the other teams because you're short. And of course, if you didn't bid enough, it means that you probably didn't use your money well enough in the beginning. So you generally, not always, because obviously if good bids come up, you want to do it. And if outrageous bids come up, you want to steer away. But as a general rule, you want to be somewhere in the middle from the economic rule of purchasing power. And it's sort of like that with FAB. Yes, there are the outlier teams or the teams that are in 15th place that if they have $700 out of 1,000 left, who the hell cares? But you want to stay somewhat in pack so that when you have the last couple of weeks when you're picking up the fill-in starters, the two-star pitchers, that you have as much purchasing power or more as everybody else. Ruvain, anything to add?
Yeah, I actually want to add something to that. Along with the whole, you have to know the market, what's going on with other teams as well. I'm not saying look at each individual team, but if you know that we use Sal Perez already as an example. You knew Sal Perez went on the IL. He's done. That team is going to need another catcher. And let's say you need a catcher. Let's say your second catcher got hurt. You know that you're going to have to pay a little bit more, or you have to, plan to pay a little bit more for that catcher that you want, just in case you get left out in the dark. Because if, let's say you want a closer and you see another guy's closer went out, let's say the Braves closer went out and Kenley Jansen's on the IL and you need the replacement and you want to try to get the replacement. Whoever has Kenley Jansen is going to want to spend more money on FAB to get that replacement. So you have to understand how much you have to pay based on how much money you have and based on how much money they have left.
Yeah, that's a super point. That if you need a shortstop, look at who else needs a shortstop in your league, and that should be a factor as to how much you bid. Right? You always need to see what the other teams are looking for. If they all have two healthy catchers, then they're not going to be bidding on a catcher. You can go lower on your FAB, and if three people need catchers, probably have to bid higher. That's definitely a good rule. In terms of specifics, in terms of dollar amount, and again, all these, of course, it's all league dependent. We can only tell you some general guidelines and have you tilt up or down based on your specific situation. But how much do you bid on streaming players? So let's start with like starting pitchers, for example. If you see a pitcher that has a really good start this week, or even better, 2 good starts, a 2-star pitcher, how much do you bid on FAAB in general? Like, what are your guidelines for how you place your bids?
For me, it really depends on who it is. Like, if it's someone that I think I can conceivably keep, if they pitch well, do I want to keep them? Then I bump that bid up a little. It's someone like, I don't really like this guy, but he's placing Pittsburgh and Detroit this week, then, probably less than I used to. I think the 2-star pitchers, the ones on the waiver wire, especially in a 15-team, are more risky than they used to be, especially more risky than they were in April when everybody was throwing gems. But, I always prefer it to be someone I could conceivably keep longer than this week. And, whether I think it's someone that I can do that with really impacts my bid. But, and you look at like future 2-star pitchers, you asked about that. I try and not go a ton on those guys. The appeal for me of going a week early on someone is the fact that I can get them cheaper. So if I can get someone cheap that is pitching twice in 2 weeks, or like a while ago I added Nick Lodolo because he was is about to come off the IL. But I only want to do that if I can get them cheap. If I have to pay for them, like I don't want to pay ahead of time, sit the guy, and then maybe start him the next week. But if I can get someone cheap, the whole point of getting someone early is sliding him through for $10 less than it would be the week later. So, but less than I used to is my answer on starting pitching, just because I feel like they are super risky for blowups these days. What I'm going to do is, if I get down the last 6 weeks, I need wins and Ks, maybe the last 2 months, then maybe I'll bump that up a little bit. But I try and, unless I'm way, way behind in wins and Ks, I try not to delve in that market too much. And I think that I've changed that from what I did probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and pitching is so much worse that what are you paying for in the wire now? You're paying for garbage. Why would you pay for it? And, the use of middle relievers. I never had middle relievers in my lineup, but, I'm Michael King. Every week I find some leagues I'm using instead of a stupid 7th starter. Not stupid. Instead of a risky 7th starter. You know what I mean. Anything to add, Ruben?
Yeah, I also think that you have to see if they have a high K rate, because if you're looking for a 2-star pitcher at this point, you probably need wins, and your ERA and WHIP are usually not that great. So if you're trying to protect your ERA and WHIP, then yes, the Michael King is the way to go, and stay away from the 2-star pitchers, because as we'll get through, and then later in the show we'll talk about the 2-star pitchers. There's nothing really appetizing out there. Also, you have to understand what's the league, what's going on with the actual schedule going on for baseball. The All-Star break's coming up. There are no future 2-star pitchers. So you have to keep that in mind, and you have to know that if whoever's going to be starting 2 starts this week is probably going to be starting 2 starts the following week, so you may get an added bonus of those guys. So you have to see how the schedule plays out, and also if you want to get the strikeouts and not worry about ERA and WHIP, then go after those 2-star guys.
It's a really good point on the strikeouts, too. With the 2-star pitchers, I really want a guy that gets strikeouts, because I know even if he struggles a little bit in ratios, at least he's going to give me something. There's nothing worse than picking up the guy with the 17% K rate who struggles and gives you 6 strikeouts total in your 2-star week. Like, I almost always want to get someone at least they're going to give me that, if nothing else.
Yeah, I advocated last week that if you're in a league that ERA and WHIP are sunk, pick up Patrick Corbin to start. What the heck? You'll get a nice amount of strikeouts, if nothing else, right? It's got to help you. Better than nothing, right? What do you do for, Scott, what do you do for streaming hitters? If you see, you need a replacement and hitter has some good matchups, probably only going to use them 1 week. We're talking about like 0.5 to 1% of your budget. Is that like the right amount?
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good number. Guys that I see, they got 8 games this week, 5 games in the first half. NFBC, for example, you can switch hitters in and out on Friday. So like a 5-game half week is really important. Or if, like I said, someone's going to Colorado, facing Pittsburgh, facing bad pitching. Yeah, but those are like, those are $12 to $17 bids. If it's someone I like that I'm definitely going to use this week, and then, see what happens after that. If I'm just getting a catcher and my catcher's got 5 games a week, I want to drop him, then I'm picking someone up. That's a $2, $3 bid. I'm not spending a lot of money on that. But, someone that I really like this week that I'm going to use for the whole week, yeah, I don't know. At a $1,000 budget, anywhere from $12 to $20, somewhere in there is usually kind of my ballpark for that kind of player.
But I'd throw something in there. If this guy's been on the waiver wire for months and no one's picked him up, you probably can put in a little lower bid, only because he's been on the waiver wire forever, and you don't have to spend that much money. The whole point is you shouldn't overspend on that 1 week guy to pick up to play a couple more games.
Yeah, that's a good point too. I mean, obviously nobody's wanted the guy. The only thing I would say to that is that's changed a little bit recently because a lot of these articles that are out now focus on the really good streaming matchups this week. So I found that those guys are a little bit harder to sneak than they used to be. But you are right. If a guy's been out there forever, you don't want to go crazy on someone that people have had 15 teams have had 10 chances to pick up and haven't. So that's a good point too.
All right, before we talk about our next topic, it's time for the Injury Gurus Trivia of the Week.
So now we're actually going to be talking about picking up closers and potential closers on the waiver wire. So my trivia is this. I'm going to give you the stat line of 2 players on the same team. Can you name the team and name the 2 players? First stat line for this reliever, a K per 9 of 11.8, a strand rate of 76%, a walk per 9 rate of 1.54, and a 194 batting average against. That's one pitcher. The second pitcher, a K rate of per 9, 9.56, a strand rate of 71%, a walk per 9 rate of 5, and an average against of 203. Which team are these 2 players playing for, and who would you want to pick up for your team?
Am I supposed to go first?
Yes, you can go first.
That's really hard. I'm just going to go, so we're talking closers, we're talking situations maybe that might be in turmoil. I'm going to go with Atlanta and say that's AJ Minter and Will Smith.
Bingo, ding, ding, ding.
Oh!
The first player I mentioned with a higher K rate is AJ Minter. Second guy is Will Smith. But in most FAABs last week or the week before, Will Smith went for more FAAB money in general than AJ Minter. So I actually ended up with a lot of shares of AJ Minter because I put in for both just to to keep everyone honest. But if you look back at what they've done recently, Will Smith had a bunch of saves last year when they won the World Series. He's got 3 saves in the last week, and AJ Minter has 2 saves in the last week. And guess what? Kenley Jansen may be back July 12th. That's next week. So you may have spent all that money on those guys. Is it worth it to even roster those types of players? Is it worth it to get those potential closers at this point?
I mean, I had bids in, but I was very low. I was in the single digits, low double digits for both Smith and Minter. Just it was one of those things that if I can get them really cheap, I'll use them for a week. But I was not spending a bunch of money on them.
Who are you higher on, by the way, for this past week? Just curious.
I actually had. I think I like Minter more as a pitcher, but I thought the usage on Smith would be more towards the 9th inning. Wrong so far. I think Minter got the only save they've had this week, and they got a save yesterday. So I had Smith like a couple bucks higher, but I would say that Minter is definitely the pitcher I like more.
Yeah, and I agree. I was on Minter the whole way. Look at those numbers. Minter is a better pitcher, but Will Smith, recency bias. Will Smith had a bunch of saves last year. They're both lefties. But the thing is, Atlanta has a ton of lefties in their bullpen. So even if you're looking at that, whether they're lefty, righty, and they're closing, if the team has a bunch of lefties, it doesn't matter if they're lefty. If they only have one lefty and the possible closer, like let's say, I mentioned this before, AJ Puck, he's a lefty in the Athletics bullpen. The chances of him closing now are slim because he is the only lefty in that bullpen. But in a situation like this, if there are a bunch of lefties or there are a bunch of righties, it doesn't matter who's going to close. I would take the guy 100% of the time who has the better peripheral numbers like that, because even if they don't get the closing job, they will still help with your statistics.
Yeah, that's very true. The Oakland closing situation, I know people bid on Trevino and whatnot. What kind of bid do you think would have been appropriate last week for a Trevino, let's say?
I think he's the guy because I think they want to showcase him and trade him. But man, I hate closers who walk a lot of guys. So I was where I needed saves, I think like something like in the 20s was probably good, but that probably wasn't getting them. I was staying away. I'm not a big Lou Trevino fan. I hope he does well for a while so the A's can trade him. Obviously, I'm an A's fan, so that'd be great. But you look at a whip over 2. You look at a lot of walks. There's nothing more frustrating to me than a guy that comes in and walks the first guy in a 1-run lead. So I had some bids, but it was just it was very small. Just in case I got him, I would use him for a couple weeks. But I was not someone I was targeting.
Right, and a guy like Gratterall, for example, maybe Kimbrel's a bit hurt. Also, that kind of small bid, it makes sense?
I'm actually mad at myself. I had Gratterall in my bids underneath Will Smith, and I read a quote at like 6 o'clock on Sunday from Dave Roberts saying, A, he's fine, Kimbrel's fine, B, he's the guy no matter what. It'd be crazy for me to take him out of the role because he had been struggling a little bit. The whip's a little high, but now he's hurt. I wish I had Graterol because Graterol was something I actually would be more interested in than Trevino. The walk rate's lower, strikes out a lot of guys, and just on a really, I mean, the problem with the A's is they don't win any games. The Dodgers win, 3, 4, 5 games every single week. So I'm actually mad at myself. I did not leave Graterol, and I should not have trusted I saw the Kimbrel line drive off him. It seemed a little weird that he would be that fine that quick, but I took what the manager said at face value, and I was wrong. But it'd be nice to have Graterol right now. I'd like to have that.
Yeah, I picked up Graterol and GDD with Derek Carty. We just it was one of those weeks that we needed live pitchers and we didn't like anybody on the waiver wire, so we just picked up a bunch of middle relievers and stuff like that. And hey, we got lucky. We got Graterol as one of them. The thing about middle relievers is when you pick somebody who's the next in line, you never know they can turn into that. And my question to you, Scott, is: do you ever look for next in line guys just to throw in? Like, are you looking for the middle relievers that have great ratios, or are you giving a little bit more preference on your team to guys who are more next in line?
I feel like the next in line has changed over the last 5 years. It used to be like, here's the closer. If he gets hurt, here's option B. And I think that's gone away. There's a lot of teams that if their guy gets hurt, they're going to go to committee. So it's a little bit of both for me. I definitely want to pick someone who's pitching well, and I want some strikeouts in there. So if I need to use them for a week, if I suddenly I have a couple stars to get hurt, or I got a couple, 2 guys going to cores or something like that, I want to be able to use the guy. So while I do want the next in line person, I'm not picking up anyone that I don't think is is actually workable as a pitcher too. So I also like to pick up guys that are behind closers I don't love. So I'm not, I don't want to pick up the guy that's behind Liam Hendrickson. Obviously, Hendricks got hurt, so that would have worked. But I try and at least pick up the next in line guy behind someone who I think might has a chance to lose the job, and the leash isn't super long.
And do you stay away from certain teams? Like, do you stay away from the Orioles? Do you stay away from the Nationals? Do you stay away from, I wouldn't say the Pirates at this point until Bednar gets traded, but would you stay away from certain teams in this situation? Also, would you rather have that second in line guy on a good team as opposed to a possible closer like a Hunter Strickland on the Reds?
Yeah, I would. I'd rather have that. I mean, I guess Strickland seems like maybe he's in the role a little more than not, but I try and avoid I definitely don't want a next in line guy that's on a team that uses a committee anyway. Because say I guess Danny Jimenez got hurt, Trevino kind of worked in, but like anything kind of midi wise, I don't want a next in line guy there. Because if I get the break where maybe the closer struggles or goes on the IL, I certainly don't want to have held someone that ends up not getting the job.
So rolling here and on to another category of prospects. Ruben and I are generally do not spend a lot on redraft leagues on prospects. The probability of a prospect being worth the FAAB that you pay is pretty low. Sure, you have those Juan Sotos that work out. You have, it happens, but in general, they usually don't work out, and that's why we don't usually bid. Or we'll bid a keep honest bid, but often that fails. When there's the FAAB-a-paloozas, we generally stay away, and that's a week we can just get the hot players and focus on everybody else. What's your stance on prospects? Should you be bidding on them? I mean, Alek Manoah's come, but usually they're busts. What do you think?
Yeah, for everyone that does well, there's a long list of guys that people end up dropping 2 weeks later. I am very, in an NFBC type of league where you get 7 bench spots, no IL, I'm very against drafting prospects, so I very, very rarely do it. If I do, it's a guy that I know is going to start, is going to be there, and all this kind of happens. I'm very rarely pick someone that's going to be in the minors for a month, or the Super 2 or the time service stuff. I avoid those people because not only you got to wait 6 weeks, but they may not even be great. When they get called up. In terms of bidding, I'd rather bid on them than draft them, but they do come with a lot of downside risk, and I understand that. If I do pay for them, for me, it's hard. Every person's different, every player's different, but I like young pitchers who come up who don't walk a lot of guys. If I get someone who already is walking guys in the minors, no matter how hyped they are, how many guys they strike out, I tend to stay away from guys like that. When you get in the majors, that is really, really exposed. So if I'm bidding for a pitcher that it keeps the walk rate down, I do like that a little more when it comes to prospects. And the same on hitters. I like guys who don't K a lot. There's so many players. We talk about them. I do the podcast on Sunday with Jeff Erickson. We always talk about, this guy, he came to the majors and his strikeout rate went up 8%. So if a guy's already at 25% in the minors, I usually shy away from guys like that because I know it's going to jump to 31, 32% at least the first time through the league. So if I can get a guy who has shown that he doesn't strike out a lot, I know it's going to jump up a little bit to it, like a Vinny P this week. Like I was in on that just because he didn't strike out in the minors, has a good plate discipline, and that usually translates pretty well to the majors. So I'm probably with you guys for the most part. I don't tend to pay for prospects in FAAB, but if I do, it's either a hitter doesn't strike out a lot or a pitcher doesn't walk a lot of guys.
Yeah, I generally agree, other than, as I mentioned before, if you are in a position where you need a boost, you're in 10th place, and you ain't going to cash, what the hell? Just give it a shot. I know there was one league where I picked up Bryson Stott. What the hell? He has a bunch of homers. You're not going to win anything if you don't get a boost. So on the off chance that guy is the thing, and they're playing, of course, they have to be playing. That's really what the story is. I was going to ask you, Ruvain, in terms of sometimes you have these drop players. Like we mentioned, like Salvador Perez was dropped, or occasionally you get a guy that he just has so many injuries and there's other star player or a very playable player. How much do you bid when you have these star players? Like somebody that, could be like a, 7th, 8th round player, really, really valuable to you. Is that something where you just say, man, I got to spend 20% of my FAAB right now because there ain't anybody else on the wire? And I guess more in mono leagues, that's the thing to do, is to spend a lot. But in mixed leagues, are you for that? Or spending like 20%? What's the right amount for that?
I think it depends on, it's a case-by-case situation. Like what we did, we dropped Yasmani Grandal for Salvador Perez. He was just dropped, and he's injured, and we know he's going to be out for a while, so we know we don't have to spend that much money on him. But let's say earlier in the year, a Jesse Winker was dropped because he was struggling, or a player like that. How much money would you spend? Again, it depends on your situation. If you need an outfielder, your outfielders are injured, you need an outfielder, you need a boost, I'll be willing to spend 20%. Listen, when it comes to picking up players, I think there are 3 Ps: playing time, pedigree, and power. Power, either home runs or power with strikeouts. I think it's a golden rule. I think you go by that. And if they have a history, they have a pedigree, I would really be willing to spend that money, especially if the pedigree is not that long ago. Like again, Sal Perez, you're gonna get at least maybe 1 month of good playing time at him. You get 1 month of good playing time at him. I'd rather that than having a Yasmani Grandal injured or the replacement value on him. So I think it's really on a case by case basis in general.
What did you guys get Perez for?
Maybe 40. I'm trying to remember.
Is that a 12 or a 15 teamer?
15 teamer.
15 team in NFBC.
And
I'll look this one up.
Your goal is your dream, in a nice scenario, you'd have him like August 10th, something like that, August 15th, somewhere in there.
Mid-August for September. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And we had Yasmani Grandal and any other catcher. We were streaming catchers.
Yeah.
So we were streaming catchers anyway, so what's the point? Why not just take that risk on him? We have room on our bench. Stick him there. But if you don't have room on your bench, then you can't do that, obviously.
That was gonna be my question. Are you starting him, or are you putting him on the bench for now?
Bench.
Okay, so you're not taking the 0 opportunity cost. You're taking the third catcher bench spot. Okay,
that's correct.
Yeah, because he's a first or second or third round player.
Yeah.
If he comes back, he's a second or third round player. I'd rather have a second round or third round value for that last month and a half than a replacement player value for catcher at that point.
Yeah, if you don't have the massive amount of injuries on your team,
right,
and you have the fungible, you got 4 or 5 batter slots, I think a first-round player for a month with 3 months to go is worth a roster spot. And we spent, by the way, $24 on him out of 1,000.
And the nice part about that is, like, if you do get a bunch of injuries, you spent 24 on him. Like, if you had to, you could drop him back. It's not like you spent $240 on him. You're like, I got to hold this guy no matter what. So, at $24, I think that's a good shot. And if you find yourself not having injuries, you hold him and you play him for 6 weeks, and you're getting a huge upgrade at catcher. And if not, you get 5 injuries, all of a sudden you can drop him back. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't need Salvador Perez, so you don't want to spend that much if you don't need him. You only want to go over if you do. Otherwise, you want to get a high return on investment. As I always say on the show, a high return on investment either comes from a good return or from a low investment. If you're spending very little, you don't have to make that much on the player, right? As long as you make something, it'll be worth the roster spot and stuff like that. What do you bid on a struggling player? Somebody drops Joey Gallo, and I don't know, in a 20-team league, what do you bid on him? Because on the offhand, well, he's a known player, could hit 40 homers, but at some point, maybe he's a bust. But you take a gamble on him. What is that worth a big bid in your opinion, Scott?
I'm one who likes when people drop struggling players, but for me, it really depends on who the player is. If it's someone like Joey Gallo, where I wasn't drafting him anyway, I'm probably not being all that aggressive about him. But if it's someone that I liked, and Trevor Rogers would probably be a good example. Like I liked him preseason. If he got dropped, I'd definitely be in on him just to kind of go for the upside. I know that some people are done with him, but yeah, Jesse Winker, I loved last year. I didn't like going to Seattle, so that example is probably tough. But if it's someone that I liked preseason, I was like, oh, I wish I had drafted him, and they struggle for 2 months, gets dropped. I'm usually pretty aggressive with guys like that because it's usually someone that had some success, has some pedigree, has done it in the past. Where we're talking about picking up prospects, like, I don't know what's happening, but if for someone like that, I know they've done it before. I like the chances of them to bounce back. I'm usually pretty aggressive with someone who is like an early drop like that.
Right. Do you budget FAAB in the year? Meaning, like, do you say I want to have 2 to 3% for each week for the weekly pickups, and then I have a spending spree so that when I need it during the year, or maybe do you have a budget for closers during the year? Do you have any kind of budgeting that you do?
I don't. I usually kind of just look at my number at the start of every week, and I know if I'm high or low, or I need to pull back. But if you lose a closer, like that goes out the window. So my goal is to not have to spend on closers. I usually try and get like 2.5 closers in the draft in a 15-teamer, and then but obviously I think I took Will Smith early on in one league and the TGFBI, so that got blown to the water already this year. But it depends on. I try and more like have benchmarks for where I am in the start of August, start of September, start of the All-Star break, and if I'm kind of in that range, I don't really worry about it. Every week is so different. There's some weeks where if I get someone, I spend $100, but if I don't, I spend 12. So it's just I want to be able to be aggressive the last 2 months. That's kind of my only benchmark with how much I have.
So funny with Will Smith that the ATC projections had him as the least risky player in terms of there was the smallest differentiation between the underlying projections that feed ATC with Will Smith's numbers. Like everyone said, he's a safe closer. He's a safe closer. And, of course, he was the most unsafe closer when you have a top closer coming to the team. Just unbelievable how his price went up because of the stability. But yet he realized just an oddball case. Okay, question is, I'll go to Ruvain first. What do you do when you make the exact bid? Like if you're talking more $1,000 leagues, if you're bidding roughly $20, do you say I'm going to bid on the 9s, 19? Do you say I'm going to bid exactly 20? I'm always going to bid 21. Do you vary it and say 1 week I'll do the 2s, I'll do 22, then I'll do 30? If you're bidding 30, next week I'm going to do 1s. Yeah, do you vary it? Like, how does that work with your exact bidding? Do you make it random? Is there any rhyme or reason to your madness?
I think it's the best to do completely random because then no one can predict what you're doing. What I would do is look at other people's bids during the course of the season, and if I find that they have a similar way of bidding, then you just follow it, and then you see, okay, you know what? I think this is going to go this way, and I can bid maybe a little less or a little more. But sometimes I'll just put a random bid. Like I'll say, you know what? I really like this guy. Let me bid, I don't know, $37. Then I'll do that on Friday, and then on Sunday I'll think, wait a second, everyone always second guesses on Sunday right before the deadline, and I'll say, you know what, maybe they can do 36, maybe they can do 39. I don't think there's a really rhyme or reason. I don't think there's anything that's to it, except for the fact that what you think you can gather as much information of what you know from the league so far, and just try to keep yourself as random as possible so no one can predict what you're doing.
What do you do, Scott?
I agree on that. I try and mix it up so I'm not the same every time in case anyone's like really studying my bids. But I think that's another one of those things that has changed the last 5 years. It felt like there have been about 900 articles that tell people not to bid on the 0s and 5s. So I think that used to be a lot of people just bid 10, 15, 20. And I think that's another one that's changed. You used to be able to get away with going 21, 22, and people like, you'd win a couple more players a year than you thought you should have just because everybody go 20. I think that's changed. But yeah, I usually don't go 0s and 5s just because I don't know. It just feels I go a little more random, then I switch it up. But I'm one who goes, I go out of 8s because I think people tend to end in 7s sometimes, but it's probably there's probably no rhyme or reason to it anymore. I think people are more random with that than they used to be, and that's kind of what I follow too.
Yeah, they're totally more random, and they used to not be. I would say though that I remember when I was taking the actuary exams, I would notice that I did a study, and I don't know why I did this study, but B was the most frequent answer on the multiple choice test. I don't know why. The question makers did it. Whatever reason, B was the most frequent. So when I would not know the answer to a question, obviously it's a 1/4 chance you would think, but I said on the off chance that there's something to it, or they're intentionally doing that, I just wrote B, B, B. So if there was, let's say, out of 50 questions, maybe 8 questions I didn't know, I would just go B, 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 B instead of guessing all over the board. And I think that makes sense here is you should take a look and see what the most frequent number of that particular year is in your league, and then add 1 or add 2. Just for the off chance that they're all not thinking about it and, they just got 2 in their mindset, just make it 3 or 4. Just to do a study and take a look. It doesn't have to be in-depth. Just take a look at a couple of previous week's bids. Just add 1 or 2. It's worth it to do that 10 seconds of math on the off chance that there's some rhyme or reason to them and it's not random, and you'll pick up on that.
Yeah. And we talk about bid numbers a lot, and I think that just final point here is that I think that the key and kind of what I do is when I'm making that final bid is when I check the bid results, 10 minutes after the deadline or anything, I want it to feel if I win a guy that I'm happy about it. Like a lot of times if I'm in a bid where I'm like I don't really want to win this one, then I lower that right away. If I want to feel good about the bid I have, that what I win someone for, and I think it's kind of a good way. It saved me some money at the time. I'm like if the results come up and I see that I won this guy for 43. Like I'm kind of going to be cringy about it. So if I am that way, I drop that a little bit. It's kind of a good rule that saved me some money.
Like, are you happy that, let's say, you put in 83 for a player and the next highest bid is 4? Are you happy then because you got the player? I'm
usually pissed, but I tend to 83 to 4. I'm pissed if it's like 23 to 4. I don't really care, but yeah, if it's more than if I'm in the 50, 60, 70s, I'm like, what did I miss here? And no one is on the player. I'm usually pretty upset about that. But if I'm anywhere under 30 and like there's no backup bid, I usually don't lose too much sleep about that.
Right. And the last question in terms of FAAB is, do you believe in keep honest bids? Well, everybody's got a bid on this guy, so I'll throw $5 on it, or I'll throw 15 if everybody's going to throw 150. Do you believe in those keep honest bids, or just don't even bother?
Sure, I probably do it. I mean, I probably I don't. If it's someone I don't really want, I won't do it. But yeah, if it's someone that I like, but I know I'm not going to win, I'll throw it in there just in case. Weirdly, my league, nobody bids on them. I'll throw someone in. If someone's going for a home for 100, I'll throw $20, $30 on them just in case everybody in my league happen to not want them to. But I don't do it too much. But yeah, I'll do it just in case. But it's usually like, there's 3 other guys below him that I think I'm going to get, and I really focus on those, knowing I'm not going to get the top guy.
Right. All right, before we go on to waiver wire, we'll do a little section of what we call holds and folds. Doesn't have to be a guy that you can pick up on the waiver wire, but hold is somebody that you think is probably going to be better than people think, and fold somebody that maybe people roster or just get rid of him, they ain't performing, and things like that. All right, let's go around the room and let's put some ideas together in terms of holds and folds. Scott, what is a hold for you? Who's a player that you think probably better that people should look at and say, going to be better than we think?
Yeah, probably mine's a little more in a trade league because it's someone that's rostered in most spots. But I'm actually really high on the second half for Matt Chapman right now. I know it's been a struggle in Toronto. He's hit 225, but he does have 13 home runs, 40 RBIs, and 304 plate appearances. I just like a lot of the underlying stuff. He's hitting the ball really hard. Hard hit rate's 51%. Barrel rate's almost 14%. Most important to me is his Ks are down. When Matt Chapman's good, it's usually because he drops the Ks. When he's bad, it's usually because he's striking out way, way too much. Strikeout rate's down 8% to 24% right now. Swinging strike rate's down 3%. It's just over 10% right now. The K rate's dropped every month. I think he's getting comfortable in Toronto, hitting in a good lineup. I think he, probably pressed that first month. You're trying to hit a home run to impress the crowd. Every single time you're up in after you sign the, get traded and sign for some money. Career BABIP's 289. He's at 257 right now. I think that's going to come around a little bit. He had 264 in June, 21 runs, 15 RBIs in the month. I think if you can make a trade for him, kind of playing on that 225 average right now, I think you get a nice windfall in the second half.
Yeah, I like it. He could be a 30 home run player by the end of the year, so that's a good pick. Ruvain, yours?
Yeah, I got a few. First of all, Jake Cronenworth, he's been underperforming all year, but he's eligible everywhere, so he's a guy you just have to hold on because he will be your quote-unquote backup guy. He may turn around, he may not, but you can always, if you have a hole, he can always fill it in, and that's pretty good. Miles Straw, I think he's still a hold for me. I'm very close to folding on him. I did have him in one league, and I traded him away for John Gray, which I'm very happy about. But Miles Straw is a stolen base guy. He's batting 194 right now. He's getting very close to that Billy Hamilton side with batting average without as many stolen bases. But people usually look for stolen bases in August and September. So if you drop him, someone's going to pick him up in a second. So I think you have to hold on to him for a little longer. As another hitter, I think is a fold, and this is going to come as a shock to some people, Nelson Cruz. Nelson Cruz is batting 240 with 8 home runs. Michael Chavis, who's available in the waiver wire, is batting 245 with 9 home runs. Victor Caratini has 7 home runs, batting 246. Nelson Cruz is, in most leagues, only eligible in the DH or utility spot. He takes up a roster spot. I think he's a guy you can drop because he's replaceable. He is 100% replaceable, and he frees up the rest of your roster. I think it's a good idea. And so another guy to hold, actually, is Walker Buehler. There is a chance he will come back by September, and if he comes back in September, it's a good team. He may come out of the bullpen. He may be a big advantage for the Dodgers down the stretch. I think if you're thinking about dropping him, I wouldn't drop him just yet.
Well, Nelson Cruz is on a bad lineup, and who knows if they trade away Josh Bell, so that could be going really sour really quickly. My hold here, I'll pick another Blue Jay here, Bo Bichette. I kind of think that he had a very underperforming first half. 257 average, really low for him. He's actually never had any single season below 298. And if you look at his underlying skills, nothing's really changed much. A few more Ks, but he has more walks as well. And stolen bases, only 5 so far this year. I kind of think that he could turn it on in September. So to me, Bo Bichette is a hold. And by the way, he homered the other day, so maybe he's on track as we speak. Before we do fold for you, Scott, Ruve mentioned Miles Straw. That's close to a Billy Hamilton profile, but he has 13 stolen bases on the year, which obviously today is somewhat valuable. Is he a profile that you're holding at all? What kind of league would you actually use a guy who's batting below 200, no RBIs, 0 home runs, but he has 13 steals, the literally definition of a one-dimensional category?
Yeah, my biggest concern with Straw, and he was someone that I wanted no part of in drafts. I kind of built my draft so I didn't have to take Miles Straw in whatever he went 7th, 8th round. My biggest concern on Straw is he's hitting 9th, and it just makes it, he gets, that's one less plate appearance a game, less chances to get on base. In the first with nobody in front of him and steal. It really, for me, it depends on how your team is doing in steals. If you happen to pick up John Birdie, you're doing really well in steals, I think you drop him. If you're in the middle of the pack, I think you have to hold Straw because he could have a 10 stolen base month here at some point. He can get a little bit warm. The BABIP's really low for him, and he's a career 300 BABIP guy. He's at 237, so it's going to come around a little bit. Strikeouts are down, so he's making contact. He's walking, which is good. I just think you have to hold him unless you're at a point where stolen bases don't make a difference. You're kind of set in that category.
Got it. And your fold.
Yeah, someone that you can't drop yet, but I'm worried about is Nick Castellanos in Philadelphia. Hitting 251, only 8 home runs. But you look at all his numbers, and it's just concerning. Hard contact is something he always had. It's like when he was in Detroit, when he was in Cincy, he always hit the ball hard. He's down to 34.5% hard hit rate, down to 7.6% barrel. Hasn't had numbers that low since 2015. His Ks are up 2.5% to 23%. Walks are down to 6.2%. The guy's OBP is 300 right now. He's just not a good player. And it's hard to figure out what's going on, but you look at hard hit rates, 23rd percentile, exit velos, 29th percentile. His chase rate is in the 5th percentile, whiff rate, 12th percentile. There's a lot of stuff, and those are lowest numbers of his career. He's swinging his first pitch, the highest number of his career. I think he probably is pressing a little bit, getting frustrated, trying to swing that first pitch to make something happen right away. His StatCast page, you look at that, it's all red. It's all hot numbers from 2016 to 2021. Now it's kind of blue, and there's a little bit of mild red in there, but he looks like a completely different hitter right now. I don't know what's going on. Maybe there's a hidden injury or something like that, but Castellanos is someone that, as I dug deeper into, I got more worried about as I looked deeper.
Yeah, and with no Harper, the protection is also gone, so that's even worse, obviously. Excellent statistical analysis on that. I'm going to throw out 2 quick ones. Joey Gallo, I don't think we need an analysis on this one. Question is Joey Gallo like the Chris Davis? Does he remind you of him?
He reminds me of him a lot. Huge power peak and then just fell off the table. Strikeout rate's 39.5% right now. I think he was an 0 for 23 slump going into yesterday. I don't know if he got a hit. Everybody on the Yankees got a hit. I think he had a home run yesterday.
Everybody the
Yankees had a hit yesterday. Scored 16 runs, but. And I don't know. If he's got 10 home runs, so he's not helping. He has 19 RBIs in the year. 230 plate appearances played in the Yankees lineup. 19 RBIs is almost impossible. He's helping you in 0 categories right now.
Yeah, 167 average. I mean, there's the Mendoza line where you hit 200,
Yeah.
and then there's the Joey Gallo line where, I mean, that's my college weight was better than that one. It's just crazy.
And Chris Davis has an 80. He usually bats 241, I think, and so that's 80 points higher. That's a huge difference. That's you can't. This is unroster. He is completely unrosterable. I think even in a 15-team league. And like I said before, if someone else wants to take him and have that headache, by all means, good luck with him.
Yeah, I mean, he's actively hurting you in 4 categories right now.
Oh
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, only if you're in really really far down and just on the off chance he's worthless. But the other reason, the less technical reason why you shouldn't have him is, first of all, he's batting 9th most days. As you said, you're batting Can you imagine a 40 home run guy batting 9th? What does that tell you? But the question is, if you're the Yankees, right, and you're doing pretty well, and it's looking like you're making the postseason, you're going to want to trade for somebody and fix this problem, because it's a very, very big problem on the team. If I'm the Yankees, I trade for somebody to solve the outfield problem, and that just cuts Gallo's time, if anything, right? He's going to lose playing time like no tomorrow. So if you can trade him in any league and get any value for him, you might do it, because his value could go to near zero. Certainly, you can't roster him now, and if he gets half the playing time, then that's completely sunk. A pinch hitter, Joey Gallo, is absolutely worthless. And I mentioned Jesse Winker. Jesse Winker is just the expectations that we had before the season from the great year last year is done. The park change has hurt him absolutely dramatically. I mean, he's batting 226. He was batting 305 last year. It's a little bit BABIP aided, but of course last year was very BABIP aided as well. His BABIP was 324. He's now down to 265. So the what's it called? The reflection principle. What goes up? Now he's seeing the opposite end. He's not hitting for power, and he could lose playing time. I mean, what if Mitch Haniger comes back? Mitch Haniger has been solid when he's healthy. I can see playing time dwindling. The Mariners could make a run for the playoffs. If he ain't hitting, he's going to be out of there. Now, they're batting him first these days. They're batting him to get him going, and at a certain point when they don't, they'll bring up Jared Kelenic and give that a shot. Winker could be in trouble. Again, I would probably fold him if you can trade him away. Hey, listen, we traded him away in labor and got Eduardo Rodriguez. Wasn't really an upgrade. He got hurt instantly, but, try trading a bad problem for a bad problem and just hope it fixes itself.
And
good.
Kyle Lewis.
Yeah,
Kyle Lewis is
Kyle
actually
Lewis
on a
too.
rehab assignment.
Yep.
Yeah, he's on a rehab assignment. He's going to be back, he'll probably be back right after the All-Star break, so he's going to take over his spot also. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. If you can get something for him, get a middle reliever who can possibly be a closer for him, 100% make that trade.
He's got to at least sit versus lefties once Lewis and Haniger are back, right? I mean, there's no way you're sitting those guys against a lefty, and then Winker plays 2/3 of the time, maybe sits a little bit. He might be. You're right. He might lose some time pretty quick here.
Very, very quick. And it's all about playing time down the stretch, really. Especially if you're up top. You're just looking for expected performance, and whatever projections that you see on Fangraphs are going to be cut, because it's all about playing time. Projections scale to playing time. If he's getting even a third less, well, that cuts his expected home run total from 8 down to 5, and 5 homers rest of season. What is that for you? That's nothing. Not worth rostering in that point. All right, waiver wire. Let's. If anybody has a player or two to mention that maybe you should pick up this week, go for it, Scott.
Yeah, it's tough. You never know how it's going to look. But pitching wise, the first guy I'm looking at is Brian Bayo in Boston. Got called up. He's going to pitch at Tampa Bay on Monday. Just a question of whether he gets more. Nate Eovaldi and Chris Sale probably back next week. He had a little bit of boost today because Josh Winkowski, who's kind of their fifth right now, got smoked by the Yankees. He's giving up 6 runs now. I don't know if he's still in the game or not looking at the TV. But Bayo was really, really good in AAA. He was 51 innings, 2.81 ERA, 1.17 WHIP. In AA, in 33 innings this year, he has a 1.60 ERA. Huge strikeout guy, 34% in AAA. The walks are a little bit high at 10%. The first start was a little bit rough at Tampa. 4 innings, 6 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 2 Ks. Really big ground ball guy, though. Like, if you're looking for an upside pitcher, every day, give me someone who strikes guys out and gets ground balls. That combo is usually really lethal. My only concern here is that if he sticks in the rotation, I think he's going to need a really good start at Tampa to stick. And if he does that, maybe he sticks and Winkowski gets out of the rotation. But I think Brian Bayo is very, very interesting just based on the big strikeout and high ground ball profile.
Good combo there, Ruven.
Well, a lot of the guys we already mentioned today, Will Smith, Adrian Minter, they're only 39 and 43% owned on CBS. If they're still available, go and get them because you don't know how long Jansen's going to be out. They said he's going to come back next week, but it's a hard issue. They may want to keep him out maybe until the All-Star break, which is only about 10 days from now. So that may be something you want to take a look at. You mentioned Lou Trevino. He's only still 25% owned on CBS. So if you still really need a closer, Danny Jimenez is still only throwing from 90 feet, and he's still a while away to come back. So Lou Trevino is the guy to get. We mentioned Brewster Gratterall already. Kimbrel had a CT scan of his back, which was normal, which means that it's muscular in nature. That's the issue. And muscle issues can last and linger. And the way he sets up, the way he bends, and the way he moves, there's a chance he may be out for. I mean, he got the win yesterday, actually. He pitched yesterday and got a win, but you don't know when it's going to flare up or anything like that, so you have to be careful with that. And Nick Senzel. Nick Senzel is only owned in 20% of CBS leagues. He's second base and outfield eligible. And in the last 3 weeks, he's batting .362, 2 homers, 8 RBIs, and 3 stolen bases, and he will get the playing time as long as he can stay healthy.
Yeah, I was going to mention Senzel. In terms of my pitchers for this week, I don't really see great stuff at the bottom, but in shallower leagues, Marco Gonzalez playing Washington, he always pitches long into games. Long into games means you could win it. And German Marquez playing Pittsburgh. I think that's a decent matchup for strikeouts and could keep the Rockies in the game. I know it's at home, but what the heck, it's Pittsburgh. In terms of hitters, you mentioned Senzel. Eric Hasse, I don't even have to pronounce his name. It's Hasse or Hasse.
That's amazing. That was my offensive player I was going to mention too. I did not
really.
I did not think we'd have something in common there. That's awesome.
Yeah, there you go. Good thing we're not playing the same league. He's red hot, by the way. I had him in almost every single 2-catcher league before the season started.
Yep,
and I dropped him, right? And I dropped him in every single league.
Me too.
Nothing, right? Kind of wish I picked him up last week. He in his last 23 plate appearances, 4 homers, 350. That's what he did last year. And do you know what position he's batting in the lineup right now?
Fourth, fifth, and fourth the last 3 games.
Yes. That is a guy who last year, not only did they play catcher, but they played in the outfield as well to get him more at-bats. That is the guy to roster. If you're in a 2-catcher league, he's available in a lot of leagues. This is an immediate button push. I usually have waiver wire picks, and I'm usually, could be this. This is like you got to pick this guy up right now, right? You agree with that? We got Scott also agreeing, right?
Yeah, I cannot. I thought at the end of the year, I was going to let me give me my one sneaky guy, and clearly not that sneaky, but he's 36% rostered in NFBC, 12-teamers, 72% the 15-teamers. I think he's a slam dunk ad in the 15s. I'm mad at myself. Yeah. I don't think I added him last week, and I meant to, and I had him in my conditionals. I think I got Carson Kelly instead, and that's a mistake there. But 36% owned in the 12-teamers. That's 24 catchers rostered. I think he should be one of the 24 catchers rostered.
I think he could be a top 10 catcher for the rest of the season, really.
He hit the ball really hard last year. It's down a little bit this year, but you give me someone hitting 4th, 5th, and 4th and playing more than he was early in the year, I think he's a really good ad.
Absolutely. The other 2 guys I mentioned is Nick Lodolo. He's under 50% owned on CBS. Buck Showalter compared him to Chris Sale. Hasn't thrown a lot of innings this year, so he's got lots of innings to give. A lot of these young guys you worry about later in the season being shut down. I don't think he will be because of the small innings. So Lodolo, he is available.
I love that one. I added him 3 weeks ago in the main event and decided to wait on him, and I really like his upside.
Absolutely.
And I drafted him in a bunch of leagues, and I held on to him and just stuck him on my IL for a while. So
love that.
I'm very high on him also.
Yeah, he looked really good against the Mets earlier this week. I only pitched 4 2/3, but struck out 8 guys. And he looked the part. If you're looking at the eye test, he looked really good in that start.
Yeah, and I'll also mention, I think an obvious pickup, 25% owned on CBS, Derek Hall. He's batting cleanup. Now, he is striking out 37% of the time. He hasn't walked a single bit so far. Sure, his homer to fly ball ratio is 43%. Understood that's pretty high, but he has been above league average in all his minors career. So it's not like he's been, low and what the heck, he's been over 25, that kind of thing. 131 WRC plus at AAA this year. That's so far carried over to the majors. I think this is one of these guys who can be a spark. Obviously, he's going to get some playing time now. You don't have Harper there. If Castellanos can somehow follow it, then you get some RBIs. Anytime you're batting 4th in the lineup, you're going to get a requisite amount of RBIs and runs, even if you're not even great. I think it's worth that chance of ad, especially if you need a spark at the bottom. Derek Cole, I think, is an interesting ad for this week. Anybody else?
Homered about an hour ago, too.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah.
There you go. So,
I have one other guy, Dom Smith. Since he's been called up, he's batting .333 with like 6 or 7 doubles. If he gets playing time, he's only 6% owned. People drafted him preseason, and a lot of people drafted him because he got sent down to the minors. Since he's been called up from the minors, he's raised his batting average close to 35 points. So he must have found something. He hit. I mentioned this a couple weeks ago. He hit very well in the minors. He's a lefty on part of the platoon there. He plays DHs. He can play first. He plays a lot, and Buck Showalter said there is a place for him on this team. So there is a chance that if he continues what he's doing, because he actually got, I don't know if you know this, but in 2019 he got 14 MVP votes that year in 2019. That's how valuable he could be.
In 19 or 20?
20. It was 2020. One of the years. It was 2019, 2020.
20.
He got 14 MVP votes.
How many of those were from the Cohen household?
Well, no, actually, the Mets. He didn't own the Mets. I don't think then, so I don't think it really mattered that much. But yeah,
I meant the host Cohen, not Steve Cohen.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
I meant the Mets fan here.
He probably voted for him twice and stuffed the ballot for him, but still, he did have the numbers to back it up, and he's only 6% owned in CBS. If you need a guy and you want to take a chance on him, he'll be dirt cheap. You get him for $1 or $2, and he's a guy you can plug into your lineup almost immediately, and he's on the good side of a platoon.
Yeah. By the way, Scott, you know that I'm related. That Steve Cohen is my uncle. You know that, right?
Oh, I did not know that.
No, I'm kidding.
Oh, I was going to say, you wouldn't have to worry about ad revenue if that was the case.
No.
Nah, joking. He's got a little bit more money than me, I think.
He's got a little more money than everybody.
Yeah.
Combined.
Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's. Well, we're up to Ruvain's injury update, and last couple of years, there's no shortage of injuries. So take it away, Ruvain.
Yeah, we got a bunch of things to talk about. Well, actually, I spoke a lot of them during the show, so it's not too bad. But we'll start with Brandon Lau, another guy who's been underperforming. He's been on the IL. People didn't know what to do with him. He's on a rehab assignment. He just started it, and he's expected to return right after the All-Star break. Tyler Mahle went on the IL on a 15-day IL with a right shoulder strain. They don't know how long he's going to be out yet. Frankie Montas, a guy who could be traded, had an MRI for his shoulder that showed no structural damage, and they're hoping he makes his next start. They're not sure about the IL, but we'll see about that. Jake Berger, a guy we mentioned on the waiver wire a couple weeks ago, he's on the IL with a bone bruise in his right hand. We'll see how long he'll be out for. Jacob deGrom is making his second rehab start. He was throwing gas already, 100 miles an hour in his first start. They want him to slow down. I don't think he knows what that means to slow down. Chris Taylor, he had a CT scan of his foot which showed a fracture. He's going to be out for a while. We don't know how long he's going to be out because we don't know what type of fracture it is. Ozzy Albies, he's still riding on a medical scooter as he recovers from surgery from the broken foot. We don't know. There's no timetable, so we don't know exactly what's going to go on with that. Another guy I want to mention, Kirk Casale, grade 2 oblique strain for the Giants. He's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. What this means is Joey Bart may end up being called up. So you want to get a sneaky bid in, try to get Joey Bart. He may be available. And I'm also going to mention Anthony Desclafani. He had surgery for his right ankle. He's done for the year.
Well, this has been an absolutely fantastic show. I think we went through amazing strategy and talked about all the gamut of bidding and players and how to bid, and of course great picks for this week. And really want to thank you, Scott, for coming on the show. It's just amazing. And if you can, please tell the audience where we can see you and all things Scott Jenstad.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate that. It's nice to get the invite, and also it was a lot of fun. It's always really fun to talk to you guys. It's always a good time. You can find me. I do the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball podcast on Sunday nights with Jeff Erickson. We do it live, so it's on YouTube, Twitter, video if you want to watch it live. It's usually about 8 o'clock on Sunday night Pacific time, so a little bit late in the Eastern time zone, but obviously it goes up on the audio version of the podcast on Monday mornings for everybody on the East Coast. But pretty much doing that mostly during the baseball season. I do the gaming golf podcast with RotoWire, and then do a football podcast during football season. But baseball-wise, the Sunday podcast is where to find me at the moment.
Amazing stuff. If you haven't listened to it yet, you should. That's my go-to Monday morning breakfast podcast. I used to travel to work more, so that was my train podcast. But now my breakfast podcast, as I'm working more from home these days. So really great stuff every single week. It's with Jeff Erickson as well over at RotoWire.
I appreciate you listening.
Absolutely. And Ruvain, what about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come, next guy up. And I also have a weekly article that comes out on Saturday discussing all the injuries that are fantasy pertinent, as well as the next guy up and how long they're going to be out for.
All right, I'm Ariel Cohen. You can see my stuff over at Fangraphs, over at RotoBaller. I'm on Twitter at ATCNY. And, of course, you can listen to me right here on the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. All right, once again, thank you so much for listening to the show. Thank you to Scott Jenstad for coming on and being our excellent guest this week. And from all of us here at the Beat the Shift podcast, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.